Hi there. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Crystal Wittevrongle, collaborating with Common Sense Edmonton, and I'm here today with Nicholas Rheubottom, who is running for Ward 10 or Ipiihkoohkanipiaohtsi. I don't know if I got it there, but
Pretty
tried.
close. Yeah, very good.
Nicholas, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk with you folks about the campaign and everything related to it.
Perfect. Well, why don't you start us off by telling me a little bit about your background and what foundation you're bringing into City Hall if you are elected.
Yeah, for sure. So I decided to run in the 2025 municipal campaign in Ward Ipiihkoohkanipiaohtsi, really based on like some very specific core pieces that I'd love to address. It's not the most attractive, sexy thing, but I'm very tired of the construction that's been in the ward on 111th and Ellerslie Road, and I feel the background I have can really help me address those and other core service delivery needs that make the city of Edmonton kind of running ship shape. So, my background, I am a founder and principal of Foresight Advisory, where I help businesses, nonprofits, and charities grow in business development. Originally, my background is in land development. So, I moved back to Edmonton for the second time about 8, 9 years ago, and have about 6 years of experience in permitting and procurement. So that was kind of my first connection with the city of Edmonton. I was the one that took the dreams of what we would be building in the city and made sure the city was okay that we were building them. I really enjoyed that experience, but really wanted the opportunity to connect more with local businesses. So after working in the private sector for a while, I moved into a more government relations role, representing local businesses that were doing development, building housing in the West End, largely in the city, but kind of citywide as well. After that, I did about 2 years of work specifically on policy and zoning with the city of Edmonton, which I know is a hot topic for a lot of Edmontonians. So I hope to engender a lot of trust as a campaign candidate in knowing a lot about land development. But after that, I moved more into the Chamber of Commerce space. I love representing local businesses and trying to find ways to make them successful in the city and in the process build Edmonton's local economy. So a lot of the work I did was how do we remove barriers for local businesses so that they can thrive in our city and in our province. And then, yeah, kind of what I realized, and this is what started my business at Foresight, was I was working for all of these nonprofits. I was very involved in bringing about a lot of change in the job sector, the housing sector, education sector. And I thought, I could probably build a business on this. So the entrepreneurial spirit in me kind of inspired me to start that business. And yeah, I've been doing it for about 2 years now. So all of these things, I think that they really tie into an individual that hopefully can listen to the constituents, but have some sound, pragmatic expertise to really help our city grow as we move into the next 4 years.
And so listening to constituents is something obviously very important to the role of a city councilor.
Yeah.
And so what are you hearing from people in your ward leading into this election? What are some of the big priorities for your ward?
Yeah, some of the big priorities, like there's very ward specific things. I mentioned the roads at the beginning. I pretty much hear that at every door. It's affecting almost every neighborhood citywide, just with the way that they connect to the major arterial roads and the fact that many people that are that deep south, like Ward Ipiihkoohkanipiaohtsi, it starts at Century Park LRT station. So it's very deep south in the city, goes all the way to Allard, Rutherford, Chappelle. Many of these people, they drive. That's their primary vehicle, or that's their primary use of transit. So if it's taking them an hour to get downtown or 45 minutes to get their kids to school, it's really disruptive for the day. So they're really looking for somebody that can provide pragmatic solutions to address that issue. City spending is another big piece. We have a spending issue in the city. It's not something that's been hidden from Edmontonians. They're quite aware of this, and they're seeing that it's resulting in increases in property taxes year over year. They want somebody who's willing to address that. And then on top of that, the other one that I've heard at the doors is safety. safety in the community, safety on the LRT, safety downtown as part of how we create revitalization in our city. Even for the folks that are living in the suburbs, they're thinking about these things. They don't see it as just a downtown issue. It's a citywide issue, and they want to know how candidates are going to address it.
And so when it comes to property taxes and spending, what are some of your thoughts around like the current property tax levels in the city of Edmonton? And if you're elected, what do you plan to do about that?
Yeah, it's outrageous. Like I can't think of a better word. Like that really is the accurate word. I think it comes from a council. You know, a lot of our current councillors, I think they got into municipal politics because they care, but they're not good at achieving a consensus in their decision making. And another habit I've seen in current council is that they're very reactive in their decision makings. They see a problem, they want to solve it right away, which I earnestly respect, but they don't think about the bill that's associated with it. And by the time budget review circles around again, we're running a deficit. And since the city can't run a deficit, the only avenue that they see to address these issues is to raise property taxes. And because they have a mindset that is very much outside of the delivery of core services, they don't even really, I think, thoughtfully consider how we might reallocate funding to address these overspending measures that were taken, which can be very frustrating for your average taxpayer. They're really being driven out of affordability. So, what would I do differently? Well, I've been very clear at the doors that I cannot lower their property taxes in 4 years from where the rate is at now. The rate is reflective of decisions made in the past. What I can commit to is more fiscal responsibility, more transparency, more efficient spending measures being taken while I'm on council. Those are my commitments. On top of that, though, I really think we need to change our environment for spending and how the city treats property taxes. I strongly believe that residential property taxes should be tied into the delivery of core services. That's an important piece. The things that your property taxes should be paying for are garbage removal, waste management, snow removal, sidewalk repair, pothole repair, neighborhood renewal in general, those core pieces. When it
Mhm.
comes to larger capital projects, those are great, but we need to look at it in a different way. We can't have the residents paying for major capital projects that are being delivered in the city, or at least being the majority spender on that. So how do we get around that? How do we come up with a solution? I think a big piece is growing our non-residential tax base. We're running a major fiscal gap right now in our city in terms of the size of our residential tax base versus non-residential. They're very disproportionate compared to other cities. So what does
Mhm.
that mean? We need to attract more business and more economic investment in the city. It's not about having an outrageous commercial tax base, like for property taxes for businesses. It's about having a large enough base so that they can put the funds towards capital spending projects that we need to do. And then beyond that, we need to look for innovative ways to pay for things outside of property taxes. So we already have one mechanism. EPCOR is obviously available as an arm's length organization with the city as the sole shareholder. It uses dividends from EPCOR to pay largely for infrastructure projects tied to the services that EPCOR offers. But that's not the only mechanism we can use to generate secondary revenue. Municipal development corporations are a great example. Calgary, I hate to compare us to Calgary, but one way that Calgary was able to develop its East Village downtown was through the use of a municipal development corporation. Closer to home, we've been seeing the Alberta Properties Trust develop its own corporation to manage the land that's in its asset portfolio, and they're gaining revenue off of this. And by being able to gain that revenue, they're putting it into the social mandates, the initiatives, and the goals that they have as a way of paying for them without having to use residential property taxes. So that's what I
Mhm.
hope to do. I hope to kind of bring in that thought process, change the way we think about spending and who pays for what.
And so you mentioned a couple times the core services of
Yeah.
City Hall, and some of the spending that happens on things that aren't core services. So do
Yeah.
you have any ideas of, of things that might could be cut that aren't core services, kind of right off the bat that could bring back some of that restraint when it comes to spending?
Yeah, like I often look at it from a like an operational spending perspective, and
Hmm.
also like the way in which we deliver our mandate of value. So I'll give you a really good example. I'm somebody that's part of the queer community. I'm very focused on inclusivity. It's very important to me. But I've seen various approaches to inclusivity and how we build an inclusive city from our past council. And one of the constructive criticisms I might offer is that we don't need siloed initiatives to be able to execute social goals. There's many ways in which we can just have integrated policy that reflects inclusivity. There's work that needs to be done, but often what I've seen is they're constantly in city council trying to create a siloed, separate initiative to realize a goal that they'd like
Hmm.
to achieve. They are listening, they're hearing the things that Edmontonians want, but their mode of approach to achieve those goals is by putting money into programs that are separate to the existing policy, the existing infrastructure. I don't want additional policy that addresses inclusivity. I want inclusive policy. I don't want additional policy that addresses climate affirmative action. I want general construction practices that reflect climate affirmation where it makes sense. So that's a big thing for me. I think I'm saying, I don't want to slash a bunch of values that are important to Edmontonians. I want to look for a way in which we can integrate those desired outcomes into the core services that we're offering rather than trying to silo them off in separate initiatives that don't translate well when you move council to council.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's a very interesting perspective, and it makes me think of the infill development, how some are very in favor of it and some are very not in favor of it, and
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of transfer that between communities, or get a consensus on that. And that's one thing that the residents of Edmonton really struggled with,
Mhm.
was not feeling heard in this policy. What are your thoughts on that?
No, it's a great question. And what's interesting, like my background is built in affordable housing and in infill. So
Hmm.
it's not only something I have kind of an outward critique on or perspective on. I was actually part of a lot of that policy development. In general, I guess I'll start with the statement that we're a growing city. Densification is important. Infill is part of that solution. We can't continue to fully just grow out and not have any efficiencies built into our existing infrastructure. So we got to grow up and we got to grow out, which means that infill is part of that solution and it's an important part of the solution. I think where council really kind of dropped the ball is making Edmontonians feel like they were actually being engaged. There was a lot of informing and less engaging.
Hmm.
I do think that infill can be something that is both achieved and actually enhances neighborhoods, but also can be respectful of the existing character of the neighborhood. So I would really like to approach the infill question from a question of design. I
Hmm.
know administration. I have a lot of folks that I'm very connected with at administration at the city of Edmonton. They really see that the shortfalls with infill, the community backlash on infill, is very much tied to design. Sometimes at the doors, what I say as I talk to constituents is, you're bringing this up as a density concern, but is this a design concern? Is it that there's boxes in the box? Or is it that you just don't like the box? And more often than not, like in a lot of the neighborhoods, it's the box. There's certainly been some concerns with some new players that have come in as builders that haven't really been considerate of parking. That's been a big part for sure.
Hmm.
I'm hearing that. I recognize that. We used to say, market demand dictated parking. And I think that's still true. But if builders ignore that the market demand is there, and don't put in the parking, then that creates frustrations. And definitely, I think that's what we're hearing. So, as a counselor, how do I approach the infill issue? I do think that we need diversity of housing types in every neighborhood. I think that it is important to have housing options. I think infill is important. I think greenfield development is very important too. Development past 41st Avenue. It's a mix of things, but at the heart of it, as we're trying to figure out what's best at the neighborhood level, we do need to engage with the residents, and we need to make sure that the residents are feeling heard. Because if we can't bring the residents on board, then it's just going to end up biting us in the butt later on, which we've seen it happen.
Exactly. And so what do you think then about the pace of development in the mature neighborhoods? Because I know that that is, the biggest concern for many other wards in the city.
Well, like from a ward perspective, I know like the deeper south of my ward, so take Chappelle, Rutherford, Allard, Desrochers, they're very happy with the pace of growth in their neighborhoods. When we get into some of the more mature neighborhoods, my ward doesn't really have mature neighborhoods, it has established neighborhoods, so they're
Hmm.
not as old. There's more concern about infill. There seems to be an openness towards semi-detached duplexes, row housing, because of what they've heard, obviously in Garneau and in the West End. There's a little more concern around that. So I'm hearing that. I personally, like, I am always very honest at the doors. I think there's a solution to address info concerns without slowing the pace of development. We are in a housing crisis. We do need to address the needs of Edmontonians when it comes to
Hmm.
housing. But I think that there can be a more nuanced approach on how we deliver that housing without slowing the pace of development.
Hmm. And so how do you see transit-oriented development fitting in with the infill development at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's so connected. So transit-oriented development is a great way to prioritize where density is.
Hmm.
A couple of things I was saying to some of my colleagues was, in some ways, I wish we could get the engagement right on row housing, because I know it's been such a big conversation piece, mid-block row housing this year, because I want to get that right so that we can start talking about priority growth areas, which is
Hmm.
another file that the city is very focused on. There are areas in the city along nodes and corridors where the life cycle of that entire area is nearing a close. The commercial buildings are getting quite old. There's derelict housing. The neighborhood in its entirety agrees that change is needed.
Hmm.
And there's an understanding that this change along the nodes and corridors can also allow us to hit some of the density targets that we have. So
Hmm.
I think whenever possible, we definitely should be focusing in on densification along nodes and corridors, because that's where we can deliver the transit piece as well. So yeah,
Hmm.
I love it. It's also a great way in which we can partner with our province and our federal government, because there's opportunities to access funds tied to transit that can
Hmm.
lead right into our housing goals. And when we can be aligned at all levels of government, I think that puts us in a really good place as a municipality.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of brings the question of how to best deal with the province, and it's something we'll talk
Mhm.
about probably in a couple of different areas here today is,
Yeah.
there's been strain with working with the province at a municipal level in recent years. And how do you
Yeah.
see that playing out in the future for the next council?
Well, I really think that the next council needs to get. I guess what I would say is we've really alienated ourselves in the past 4 years from the province. We need to have a collaborative approach when we work with our province. It's not about neither side holding withholding accountability.
Hmm.
Accountability is really important. I'm here to represent Edmontonians. I know the responsibilities within my jurisdiction. I know the responsibilities within the provincial jurisdiction. If the provincial jurisdiction is not delivering on what they're responsible for, I'll hold them accountable. But the point of the matter is we can never let that holding of accountability prevent us from partnering with the province. If
Hmm.
we do that, if we alienate ourselves from the province, all we do is we take ourselves out of the room. and we
Yeah.
miss opportunities. We've seen that in the past. We've seen that in comparison to how Calgary's been able to take advantage of provincial collaborations that Edmonton would really benefit from, but really just hasn't been there. So
Mm-hmm.
what I would say is I want to work to repair that relationship with the province. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here to represent the needs of my constituents, but in order to deliver the needs of my constituents, it's about playing ball with the province. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very important to me. And then kind of it's a tangential thing, but I'm just going to mention it really quick because I think it's important. As a municipality, city council needs to be nonpartisan in and of itself. There has been a lot of ideological dialogue and rhetoric that has been present in council.
Mm-hmm.
I totally respect difference of opinions. I think it's so important that we have diverse perspectives that are being brought at council, but we're not there at the behest of the UCP party or the NDP party.
Mm-hmm.
Neither party should be playing into the way that we're making our decisions at a council level. So, something that I hope to as a councillor, and I hope the other councillors will do, is take some of that ideology on both sides out of day to day council practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that kind of goes in with that there's these new political parties at the municipal level.
Yeah.
And while they're not, the provincial parties, there is some affiliations there. Are you yourself affiliated with any of the municipal parties or provincial parties in any way?
I'm running in a municipal party. We're called
Hmm.
Better Edmonton. So
Hmm.
Tim Cartmel is currently running for mayor as the head of Better Edmonton. And his vision, a vision I very much agree with, is we need a team of people that are willing to bring a consensus back to council. So we
Hmm.
have one individual that's running in each ward. And the three things we've committed ourselves to is addressing the property tax issues that Edmontonians are outcrying outraged about,
Hmm.
addressing the property tax issues, addressing the construction issues, and addressing public safety, because Edmontonians across the board are saying we want to change. So
Hmm.
we have committed to addressing those things from day one. We spent the entire campaign working on talking to one another, telling each other what we're hearing, so that day one we're ready to go on that.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean, though, that we're affiliated with a party at the provincial level. You
Hmm.
actually can't be affiliated with a existing provincial party at a municipal level. The
Hmm.
bill does not allow that. So we're not UCP affiliated. We're not NDP affiliated. We're not endorsed, nor has any candidate accepted any donations tied to either party. So that was something that was very important to us as we formed
Hmm.
this party. Our party is about a team at the municipal level, bringing
Hmm.
together diverse perspectives, engendering enough trust in one another that when one person has some expertise that might be value, we actually listen to our fellow colleagues and then willing to make a decision that is built off of consensus. So
Hmm.
that's what our party's about. Our party is very much in the municipal space. It's not ideological, it's values based, echoing what we're hearing from Edmontonians: property
Hmm.
taxes, construction, and safety.
And on safety, transit safety is a top thing for many people, top of
Mhm.
mind. And as we're talking about infill development or densification and transit nodes or corridors, we need to consider how transit safety plays into that. And we're
Of
seeing
course.
a lot of hesitation for people to take transit or even just a decrease in ridership. What are your thoughts on how we can turn that around? What can we do about the safety on transit in order to, bring some ridership back, but also just leave people with the feeling that they can even just take transit safely?
Of course. Yeah, no, I definitely empathize with that one. It's very close to home for me because I take public transit on a regular basis. So I take the LRT almost daily. And while I very much appreciate the solutions that public transit offers me, if I don't feel safe on LRT, as a man. I can only imagine what it's like for vulnerable populations, seniors, younger persons, um, women. Folks are saying, I don't feel safe on transit. And where I think it comes from is I think a perceived lack of safety is a two-pronged issue right now in the city of Edmonton. And transit really plays into the first one more than the second one. The first side of it is disorder. So perceived lack of safety due to disorder. Houselessness downtown, mental health issues unresolved, substance abuse. These are things that are creating disorder in our city. I think compassion is very important. I believe in a housing first approach where if we house folks that are experiencing these issues, that's the best way we can provide the wraparound services that in the end are the most cost effective way to help people and to address the fallout from it, but also to create more safety. So I want to address some of the disorder issues that have fallen into our public transit. So how would I do that? One big piece is actually wearing just my design cap. So like looking at it from the perspective of design.
Hmm.
I want to introduce turnstiles back on LRT platforms. So it's about ensuring that the people that are on the LRT are the people that are using the LRT to get to work, get to school, do their errands. Not people that are just on the LRT because they want to be on the LRT because they got nothing else to do that day. So I'm hoping that that will really change where we're seeing the people that are creating a sense of disorder for us. It's not about ignoring those people and ignoring their needs. It's about making sure that the priorities there aren't conflicting with the
Hmm.
priorities of safety that
Hmm.
Edmontonians are looking for. When I have folks that are telling me, I've had the same doctor for 40 years, they happen to live in the West End. I'm 70, I don't drive anymore. I don't want to change doctors, but I hate taking the LRT. Like that really breaks my heart. Like I really think it's important that we have this as an option. I know so many students and parents that are saying, we're paying for our kids' parking at the U of A, even though it's significantly more expensive because we just don't feel comfortable letting them take the LRT. And the
Hmm.
buses equally are a problem depending on the routes that you're taking too. So I would like to address that disorder piece while still addressing the root causes that are tied to that disorder
Hmm.
to make people feel safe and also make help people that are in need of help.
And so, what do you propose for those people that are in need of help, that, maybe don't need to be in these spaces, but are out of necessity or,
Yeah,
just for warmth or other reasons?
of
How
course.
are they best served?
Like I said, a housing first approach, I think, is a really strong one. I think that no matter where you are, kind of in your journey in life, housing is a need. It's not a want. And I believe that that is actually the best way that we can deliver the services that people need that are vulnerable. So if they have mental health problems and they need support with that, that's the best way you can deliver it is if they have an address. Same thing with substance abuse problems. You can deliver it best if they have an address. And I believe that in the long run, it's also the fiscally responsible thing to do as well. It allows us to efficiently deliver those services rather than trying to use more triage approaches that we've seen used in the past. Now, speaking to the triage piece, I really think that this is again where partnerships with the province and the federal government are so important. The
Hmm.
city of Edmonton cannot bear the brunt of solving every issue that's outside of its jurisdiction. I think a great way that they can align themselves with meeting those needs is in what they can do for targeted affordable housing and supportive housing support. I think that that's something that Edmontonians have said they support. They support the city being invested in subsidized housing. Um, and I think that that's a part that we can play, but it's a better part that we can play rather than trying to solve some of the other issues that are tied to it that are
Hmm.
very much in the jurisdiction of the province or in the jurisdiction of the federal government. So we need to learn how to partner to kind of cover all pieces of the issue
Hmm.
rather than trying to solve the whole thing ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about was, the provincial responsibility for when it comes to, mental health and addictions or the healthcare piece and how those lines can get really blurry when
Yeah.
there's, co-occurring issues that, the city is often the one to have to deal
Mhm.
with. And so transit safety is just one of the bigger pieces of safety
Of
overall.
course. Yeah.
Um, and at the heart of this is the relationship between the Edmonton Police Service, the Police Commission, and City Council.
Yeah.
And in recent years, that has been quite tumultuous. What do you think about that? How do we bring trust back to that relationship?
Well, I think we bring trust back by, first of all, recognizing that the outcome we want is the same. So it's the mandate of delivering a sense of safety to Edmontonians. So we need to work from that common ground. I think that's the good place to start. Then we need to start thinking about how do we deliver that mandate. Um, the first thing I would say is that EPS can't deliver the mandate unless they have the resources they need. So, a question of trying to slim down resources is not really a question I want to address. I want to be able to communicate to my constituents how EPS is addressing safety and delivering safety to them. But in the end, I need to be able to ensure that Edmonton Police Services is able to deliver on that mandate. So I think that all of this rhetoric and all of these conversations that we have been having about how much we need to see as council, who needs to be responsible for making decisions, I think in the end, they're not the right questions that we should be answering. The questions we should be answering is how can we make Edmontonians feel safe? How can we communicate with one another to make Edmontonians to feel more confident that we're making Edmontonians feel safe? And how can I be like a mediator between EPS and the average constituent? Every time there's a perceived lack of safety, the constituent's going to come to me as their counselor. I need to have a direct pathway with EPS where EPS feels confident that they can tell me, okay, this is the issue they're referring to. This is the work that we're doing in the community to deliver safety there. And then I can voice that back to constituents. If we can't do that, there's something wrong. There needs to be more transparency or there needs to be more conversation happening. But this isn't a budget question. Like this is a PR thing of anything. It's a question of optics and openness. And that openness comes from trust. So
Hmm.
I guess what I would say is we need to get back to that core mandate of delivering trust. And what do I think it looks like? Like, what do I think EPS should do first? It's been made pretty clear to me at the doors that Edmontonians would like to see more community policing. So they actually don't want. It's not an enforcement piece. They. It's not about talking to EPS or seeing EPS after something has happened and then
Hmm.
evaluating how EPS handled that issue. They see a large part of EPS being proactive policing. They want to
Hmm.
see EPS present in their neighborhoods because that makes them feel safer and it leads them to the conclusion that their neighborhood will be safer. Less crime will happen because the police are there. And we've communicated that to EPS. I had the opportunity to do an event with Edmonton Police Services where they presented kind of their annual report, some crime trends, etc. And that
Hmm.
was something I brought to the table is that residents want to feel safe by seeing the police in their neighborhood. They want to know the beat cop that's responsible for their area. They want to know if he or she is married or if they have a family or if they live close by. Like those are important things to them. They want to have a familiarity with the people that are representing and delivering their safety in the community. And I think
Hmm.
we lost that mentality a little bit with COVID, and we just need to get back on board with that piece. And I think that that will make things run a lot more smoothly.
And so, in order to get back to more community policing, do you see there being a need for additional resources? Or is it just a repurposing or a reorganization of current resources?
Well, I know that there's like I definitely am the kind of person I want to know if the or if Edmonton Police Services thinks they need another helicopter or something like that. Those big ticket items, like they're important conversation pieces that should have a conversation tied to them. But when it comes to what EPS currently needs, what they've communicated to the candidates that are running, what I know they've communicated to council, is their labor force is being outpaced by growth in the
Mm,
city of Edmonton. So even though they're continuing to hire people and grow the police force, the representatives per 100,000 people, for example, is actually going down. It's trending downward. So I know that Edmonton Police needs more officers that are actually working. I also think that there's a need for more administrative supports as well. Things like dispatch and being able to coordinate who is responsible for what. That's an important resource that needs to be cultivated and built. It again might not be the first thing that people think of when they're thinking about how do we improve upon safety? But it really is an important piece, knowing who delivers that safety and who addresses those concerns in the first place. We have a lot of different facets of emergency medical services, emergency services tied to peace officers, EPS. There's so many like different branches. And
mhm,
what we often find is one is going to address an issue that is really only tangentially related to them. So how do we more efficiently use those resources? But I
mhm,
would say that labor specifically needs to be something that actually is continues to be resourced, and we actually have to increase those resources.
mhm. And there's a bigger conversation to be had about how do we maintain some of the operational independence for police with balancing against democratic kind of
Yeah.
values. And how do you see the public's view on that?
Well, I get the public's view, like especially like when we're talking about budget, the role of the counselors is to approve the budget, but the
Hmm.
counselors don't get a full look at the budget. That budget is developed by EPS, and we're given a condensed number. We're given the allocations summarized, and
Hmm.
I know that that can create a sense of maybe a disconnect because people are like, well, fiscal transparency is about knowing where every dollar and cent is spent. But
Hmm.
we have to understand that when it comes to the delivery of safety, sometimes you do have to silo off that spending because that spending can signal to how the police is delivering that safety. And to the people that don't care about safety, the criminals, it's important that they not get a sense of where Edmonton Police Services is dedicating its resources. But that said, I think it's important that we have enough information to communicate that the resources are going where they're needed to go. So, what are some things about the status quo that I do like? I do like that that there are some counselors dedicated to serving on the police commission. I think
Hmm.
that's important. I don't think that should go away. I think that's a lever we can pull to have better communication. I'd
Hmm.
love to look for other ways where we can facilitate better communications so that counselors can feel more confident communicating to your average constituent where resources are going. But I want to do it in a way that everybody's comfortable with. And this is something I need to learn more about because I don't have
Hmm.
all the answers. I'm really excited that as part of the team that I'm running on, we have two people that actually have background in police services. So
Mm.
I'm really relying on their expertise to help inform the discussion because that's what we committed to doing. If there's somebody else that might have a more informed perspective, I'm going to draw from that.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, Nicholas, this has been a very lovely conversation, and I've really appreciated getting to hear your well thought out priorities and perspectives on things here. And so, if you're going to leave one thing with our viewers today, whether or not they're in your ward, what would you want to leave them with?
I guess kind of my commitment as a counselor. So I am going to be that counselor that listens. I want to bring their perspectives to the table. I think that's the role of a counselor. Um, my commitment to them is that I'm going to deliver more fiscal transparency and responsibility in the way that I use their money to deliver the services that we need in the city of Edmonton. I also want to offer more transparency in governance too. I want to be clearer about the role that I as a counselor play versus the role that I as an individual citizen play. I've noticed even just during the campaign, there's been a lot of candidates that have been getting into conversations that are at provincial jurisdiction. And I always get concerned about that because I think that creates a lack of transparency in governance
Mm-hmm.
for constituents. It makes constituents think that this is something that the councillor is taking the lead on.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the councillor continues taking the lead on that, we get into the overspending issue where suddenly they're starting to build initiatives, they're starting to build programs that are reflective of these political perspectives on things that aren't even in their jurisdiction as counselors, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes normalized. So, what I'm committed, that was a very long response, but really what I'm committed to is also bringing in transparency of governance in my role as a counselor. So,
Mm-hmm.
I hope people find these things valuable. I hope they resonate with them across the city because I'm really dedicated to supporting you at your municipal needs. I'm not in this for as a rung in the ladder to something else, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with me about this. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. I do want to leave you with a few of my own thoughts, which is to just stay informed, get engaged, please get out and vote. Edmonton in 2021 had a pretty dismal turnout for the election. We need more. You have a say. Please get out and exercise that. And once again, Nicholas, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.